So previously we had our RSS reader that displayed a white screen and all the titles from the RSS were here. Titles, Supertones Rise Up in Singapore, and then some detail about the news story, right? The description. Well, now the idea is that now we want to have this in our app right here in the middle of the screen showing up as an app. So we're going to get started. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the main storyboard, and we're going to add a table view component here, a table view. Okay, there are many ways of doing this. I'm just going to show you this one for whatever that's worth. We'll learn another method later on when we see master detail applications. So we drag this over here. That's what it's going to. That is a line in the middle, right? Now, later on, if you notice this, if I shrink it, it's using almost all of the real estate in the screen, right? So what I can do here is I'm going to try to shrink it a little bit. Oh, that part is shrunk. How about up here? Table view, select that. Yeah, I believe it's good here. Let's move it down a bit. There. I'm gonna make it a little smaller just so there's room enough to put some buttons and other gadgets. Let's see how this is looking now. Now I have this area here that doesn't have that, and this area up here which will be good to put buttons and stuff like that. Okay. So I have my table view. The idea now is that in each of the lines here, I'll have a news story. So the first thing that I have to do is to gain access to this table view so I can change it, right? And to do that, we go to the assistant editor, and we're going to control-click the table view to that interface, and we're going to create an outlet. First, select the table view. Now, click and drag. We're going to create an outlet, and we're going to call it, let's call it table of feeds. How about that? Table of feeds. We're going to connect that. Now we have our table of feeds. And just so you see what it's looking like, I'm going to run it just once. This is going to show the same thing in text behind, but then there's this table of feeds here that contains nothing. Looks like a notebook a little bit. So now let's go to our view controller. We're going to do a couple of changes here. See, we have our table of feeds now. I'm also going to make a global property, our news feed. So property strong non-atomic newsfeed NF. I'm going to make that a property. I'm going to make it global. You'll see the benefits of that in a second. So to change that from what we had, remember we were in view did load, we were creating our newsfeed here. I'm going to get rid of this line because now it's going to be a global variable, and all I have to do is just prepend all of these with self. Self.nf, self.nf, self.nf. I believe I'm good. Okay, so we have two global variables, the table of feeds and nf. Now here's the thing. The table, to be able to display our news stories, it needs a data source, which happens that NSArray is a very good structure for a data source, and because we have all the news stories in an NSArray, then we can quickly make that into a data source. So we'll see that. We'll see so the first thing that we need is a class that implements the interface or the protocol UI table view data source. I'm gonna just implement it here in my UI view controller. We say that a class implements an interface, to use Java terminology, or actually implements a protocol by appending it like that in angle braces UI table view data source. Okay, so this implements the interface. Now, how do I know which methods to implement in this interface? Well, if I just run it, it's going to say here that, whoops, in my errors, where am I here? My warnings. It's going to say method in protocol not implemented, right? And we can take a look at this. If I click on the little number here, method in protocol not implemented. If I click there, it's going to take me to the name of the method that I have to implement. Table view save cell for rows and index path. I have not implemented this, and I am not implementing this other method. We're going to see what these methods do. When you click on the method not implemented, this actually takes you to the header file that defines the protocol. Here's how it's defining protocol: UI table view data source. These are the required methods, and these are the optional methods, okay, and so on and so forth. So I'm just going to copy these two headers because I will need them. And I'm going to go to my RSS view controller.m. Stop this guy. So let's implement these methods. The first thing that you want to do when you want to implement methods that come from an interface and not from the class that you have at hand is to put a little comment. And usually in iOS we use pragmamark, and then that's basically any comment. This helps the compiler and helps you later get to that code. We'll call this UI table view data source methods. So the first method is the table view number of rows in section. This is how many rows is my table view going to have. Well, because we're reading, remember, don't lose the focus, we are reading RSS stories. So the number of rows is the number of RSS titles that I have. Where do I have that information? How many RSS items did I read? Well, that's in the newsfeed component that now is global newsfeed, and the property where the array, the NS array where all my news feeds are contained is news stories, and then it just say count. So I'm going to return this. Return self-nf news stories dot count. That returns the number of news stories there are, which is equivalent to the number of rows in this section. Tables can have multiple rows and multiple columns. So a column is a section. Okay, by default they only have one column. Okay, so I'll implement this. Now, when the table displays itself, because of the delegate pattern that we've talked before, it will know to call a UA table view data source. It will know to call a table view data source, and it will know to call these methods. Okay, we will tell the table that our data source is here, so it knows how to call it. So let's do just that. Here in the viewDidLoad, okay, in the viewDidLoad, what we're going to do, viewDidLoad, right after all of retrieving the news and printing them out on the screen, we're going to do self table of feeds set data source, and then who's implementing a table view data source? This RSS view controller.m, this very class. So I'll just say self. Basically, I'm saying the implementation of a data source for the table of feeds is right here. Okay? So then we have this. Remember, the first thing is we tell it how many rows it's going to have. The second thing that's very important is is this one. this one creates a cell. So when the table view loads its rows, for the first row it's going to call the method table view, it's going to pass itself, and then it's going to say cell for row at index path 0. Okay? Then cell for row at index path 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth. Okay? That is how the table will load its data. So we need, and it's going to call this method. If we don't implement this, all the cells are going to be blank because there's nothing to load. So we need to implement this method. Now the index path is not quite just 0 or 1. It's actually a combination of section or column and row. So we have to extract the row component of it, not the section component of it. We'll see how it's done. So the way to do this is we're going to create a, first we need an ID for the cells and a string cell ID, and then this can be anything you want. So this can be feeds. Okay, that's going to be my ID for cells for this table view. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a UI table view cell. Okay, that's going to be my cell. Now here's the thing. When you scroll through multiple rows, some of the rows have already been created. So you want to see if the rows that are supposed to be, if that particular row that the table view is trying to display, you want to see if it was displayed already so you don't have to create it again. To do that, you say table view, which is this one, right? Table view DQ reusable cell with identifier, and then oops, this is cell ID. What this is doing is it's saying, hey, you want to create a new cell, but if it's one of the ones that I had created already, okay, just put it there. Don't create a new one. Now, if there isn't a cached cell, then the cell is going to be nil, right? So what happens if the cell is nil? Basically, it's a brand new cell. Well, this cell is going to be a UI table view cell. Right, UI table view cell. I'm going to lock this guy in it. Whoops, and init. Right, so I'm going to create my table view cell with that. Then look at this. So I have an empty table view cell. Now, with that empty table view cell, I'm going to bring my information. So ns mutable dictionary. Whoops, dictionary. This is the new story at hand. It's going to be ns mutable dictionary, and I'm going to cast. Look what I'm going to cast. I am going to cast the news feed, news stories, okay, the object at index, and here it's the, so I'm going to bring the corresponding news story. How do I know which news story corresponds to which cell? Because when the table is being created, it's going to give me an index path of what's supposed to be bringing. So I'm going to say index path dot row. That is, and basically for each row I'm going to bring its corresponding array in the element in the array. So if it's index path row 0, then I'm going to bring the new stories, the 0th element. Okay, think about it for a second if you want to pause a little bit. But when the table view is being created, for each cell, that table view is going to call this method, and it's going to give me the table view it's going to give me the table view in which it's acting. It's going to give me the row and column for which it wants a cell. And what I have to do is return that UI table view cell. Okay, so I created a cell. I try to get it from the cached cells. If I don't find it, I'll create a new one. and then I'll create a new empty cell. And now to put the data in there, I need to bring my, remember each news item was an NS Mutable dictionary. So I'll bring my NS Mutable dictionary at the NS Mutable dictionary that it's at the same position that the row that I want to fill. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say cell text label. I can do this, cell dot text label set text, and then the text that I'm going to say here, okay, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do news object for key title. Okay, remember that objects for key is going to give the title element of the dictionary, which is my news item. Okay, so I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to return my cell. I have a problem here. NS Mutable dictionary, self NF, news stories object at index row. That is good. What's the error? NS Mutable dictionary. Oh, this is the error. Okay, sorry about that. That was the error. I need to cast outside. And the other thing that I want to do, by the way, before I finish, is actually to synthesize my properties. So I'm going to synthesize NF, which I made global. And here we have all the stories. See, we can go, and now we have all the stories. Now, these are very thin, very narrow cells. So let's try to make that, well, let's try to first put the description here, okay? This is all in the method that requests a cell, So what I can do is, I could create potentially a string here. Instead of news object for key title, I could actually add a little bit more, and I could say NS string with format, right? And then I'll put, I don't know, title /n, and then the description. So this will be news object for key title, oops, comma, news object for key description. Okay, so I have that, and then this goes here and it closes here. So now I'm adding the description to this. Let's see how this looks. Hint, it's going to look awful. So now it looks like that. It's unreadable, absolutely unusable. Page turns to tragedy. 38 die in Hong Kong boat disaster. This is just not a pretty reader. What we want is it's to define a couple of things. First, when we created our cell, UI table view cell, alloc, we're going to do something a little bit more stylish. We're going to say init with style. And there are many styles. You're welcome to try them all. But one that matches what we want to do is the UI table view cell. Table view cell subtitle. Table view cell style subtitle. Okay. What this does is it's going to give us like a title more bold, and then it's going to give us a subtitle that we can change. Okay. And then it says reuse identifier, and this is our cell ID. Okay, whenever you need an identifier, is always going to be cell ID, most likely. Okay, so now we're setting the text label to the title. We're setting the text label to the title. And we're going to do this now that we have this style. We have a detailed text label, set text, and we're going to set this to the description. News object for key description. Oops, one more. Okay, let's see what happens here now. Well, better, right? So there's 2 lines there, but then notice this one, for example. If you see this, what you will notice is that sometimes the titles cut and then there's 3 dots because it was a very long title. So what we want is we want to have multiple lines here. So the next thing we're going to say to the cell is cell the detail text label. Okay. Set number of lines. We're going to say, how about we say 2 lines. Okay. And let's see how this goes. So we're going to run this and check. Now we have 2 lines that push the title up a little bit. So it seems that we need to widen the table cells. Okay. And for that, we don't do it in each individual cell, but we do it here. When we are setting the table of feeds, when we're initializing that, we're going to say self table of feeds, and we're going to say set row height, and I'm just going to give it a float 70 pixels. Okay. So let's run this. Now this is a much more appealing newsreader. Okay? This is a much more appealing newsreader. Now that you know how to create buttons, and now that you can actually create this, oh, perhaps we need to have it in 3 lines. Okay? You fix that. One thing that you could do on your own is to put a little button here to refresh the table from the internet. Okay? And when you load this, just, because it's the default, it's going to be loaded from the properties. One tip for that is you can do self table of feeds. They have the table view has a method called reload data. That will force it to, when you change the data in the data source, then reload data will actually force a reload in the table. And that finishes our RSS reader. It's up to you to finish the implementation, and perhaps you can make a nice one on the market.